But I've also, again, I've pivoted back and forth. So I just think it's really critical that we allow ourselves to kind of be in different places and spaces throughout our careers. It's never too late for something, it's never too early for something. So I've just, really enjoyed my career journey over the last, like I said, like 12, 13 years.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Be She podcast. Be seen, be heard, be empowered. And I'm really excited about this conversation today because it's a little different than what the conversation we normally have. Normally, we are talking with entrepreneurs specifically, and we have someone else joining me today, a special guest. Her name is Shanarra Goode, and she is in the corporate space. So we're going to have a different kind of conversation today. So welcome, Shanarra, to the show. I am really happy to have you here with me.
Thank you so much. I love this kind of like almost like opposite day. I do a little bit of the same thing on my podcast, so love it. Happy to be
Fantastic.
here.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good conversation. And I'm also really excited to share your podcast. So Shanarra is
Yeah.
not only in the corporate space and she helps women and people in specific ways, which we're going to talk to you about, but she's also a fellow podcast host, which is exciting. And I'm going to
Yes.
share that with you too. So before we dive in, Shanarra, I'm going to give everyone listening a little background on you. So
Awesome.
Shanarra Goode is a dynamic podcast host and accomplished retail professional with over a decade of industry experience. She's honed her skills at Target as a business analyst for 4 years before transitioning to work with smaller beauty and personal care startups. During this time, Shanarra developed a passion for helping emerging brands overcome challenges and achieve growth. Her expertise in inventory planning, management, and optimizing supply chain strategies has been instrumental in improving efficiencies and market presence for these companies. As the host of The Good Guide, Shanarra leverages her extensive corporate and entrepreneurial experience to create an invaluable resource for professionals navigating their career journeys. So whether you're climbing the corporate ladder or embarking on a startup adventure, The Good Guide is your trusted companion, offering insights and strategies for success. Shanarra's authenticity and inspiring journey resonate with our audience, making her a relatable and motivating figure. And just from our conversation behind the scenes, I
Mm.
100% on board with that comment because
Thank
you are
you.
highly relatable and extremely easy to talk to, and also
Thank
fun. And
you.
we chatted about, which I want to talk about today too. Maybe we'll dive into this topic of being an
Yeah.
extroverted introvert. We talked a little bit
Yeah.
about that, so would love to have that conversation as well. So
Absolutely.
to get this episode kicked off, and my dog is now, I told you, Shu, he was going to get scared with this weather. We're having some
No
thunder
worries.
going on right now, and he just literally came under my feet and bumped the table. So we're a little shaky over here with the video. That's all okay. So Shanarra, can you give us a little background about you
Yeah.
and your journey leading up to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's crazy because I feel like every single time I really sit and think about my career journey, I like always have to tack on a year of like, wow, it's already been another year and another year. So, yeah, I've been in the, corporate space for, gosh, I guess 12, 13 years now, which again, I think it's absolutely crazy to say. And for me, I've always been someone that's been so clear and intentional about like all of the career moves, like at the time. And at the time that I made different career pivots, I would say they were intentional, but they were very scary, and I didn't have a lot of direction. So I was very much, I started college and I went in knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I studied at Syracuse University, was there for 4 years. I wanted to be in retail. I wanted to be in the business school, and I've never wavered from that kind of like desire to make that my goal. So I got in, went to school, excelled, really enjoyed it, came right out of school and, immediately went into the workforce. And I feel like, especially as a millennial, that was just what we did. I think I'm so jealous of Gen Zers who kind of like now they're like, oh, I'm going to travel, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So I'm like, first of all, like, kudos to you guys. But
Mm.
anyway, I went the traditional route, graduated college and went straight to work in the corporate retail space, exactly what I wanted to do. And I spent 4 years in that space. And I would say like it really became this like created this amazing foundation for me. I learned leadership skills. I learned autonomy. I learned to be independent in the workplace. I learned my voice. I think it's a really big shift going from knowing your voice in college and as kind of a, a young adult to knowing your voice as an adult making like business decisions. And it was it was a big shift. And I had a lot of support doing that. Then I got to this point early in my career. So I was about 4 years into it where I kind of just had this like, what is life? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm over here, like, chasing someone else's money. And I moved to New York. At the time I was living in Minneapolis. I moved to New York City. And I actually, one of the most profound moments in my career was I was fired from a job. I was unhappy. I had really made this career decision thinking that it would be one thing, and it did not come to fruition. And a lot of the mental and emotional things that I was going through really showed up in terms of how I came to work. And I
Mm.
wholeheartedly say that was the best decision that someone made on my behalf, right? And it forever changed the trajectory of my career. So I then from there went to teach fitness full time. This was the first time in my life that I said, you know what, if money weren't an object, like what would I want to do? Like
Mm.
just take a beat, you know what I mean? Like give me some time to just figure it out. And it was the freest, the most fun I've had like as an adult in my entire life, kind of doing something that brought me an income. You know what I mean? Like going from working at a desk 9 to 5 to
Mm.
being a fitness instructor all times of the day. Like it just was such a freeing experience for me. Someone who was always so tied to like, oh, you got to be, successful from a business standpoint. And so I did that for about 2 years. In that time, I then moved to LA, where I'm technically from SoCal, but I've moved around a ton if you can't tell. But I then moved to LA, and I just kind of got this like desire to be back in the space, like
Mm.
back kind of making business decisions. And I felt like it was the right moment. I really did. I think I had like taken the time to just kind of understand like if I played in the sandbox a little bit, like how much would I really enjoy that? And I enjoyed it. What I found though is that like no, there's still too many things going on in my head that like being a fitness instructor wasn't fully fulfilling.
Mm.
So I went back to the corporate space. This time I felt like I had a new lease on life. I felt like I really, again, had played and pushed myself in a different way. And basically, the last 5 years have been me working in smaller organizations, in some way, shape, or form, doing kind of what I was doing at the beginning of my career, but I now was working with company sizes of 5 people versus, thousands and thousands.
Mm.
I got to work with talent. I'm here in LA, and so I got to work with talent from, Jessica Alba to Cameron Diaz, and it was really cool to see them shift from being a professional in a different industry to being in the business world. So yeah, it's been just a crazy ride. And one of the things that I always talk to either the team that I currently lead today, anyone who I'm talking to, even outside of my organization, is like, I just think it's so important, especially as women, for us to try on various hats.
Yeah.
I've done entrepreneurship and I've really enjoyed that as well. But I've also realized like for me, I just really love being in the pocket of kind of like sitting around that large table, like making, expensive decisions. I love the kind of the weight of that. But I've also, again, I've pivoted back and forth. So I just think it's really critical that we allow ourselves to kind of be in different places and spaces throughout our careers. It's never too late for something. It's never too early for something. So I've just, really enjoyed my career journey over the last, like I said, like 12, 13 years. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And thank you for sharing all of that because there's so much
Yeah.
there that I'd like to unpack. You talked about pivoting. You talked about
Hmm.
trusting your inner voice
Hmm.
and what's right
Yeah.
and what's not, what's working and what's not working, what's really
Yeah.
lighting you up and really not what you're passionate about.
Yep.
Also you talked about, things happening for you versus to you.
Hmm.
Somebody making a
Hmm.
decision
Absolutely.
that maybe you weren't ready for in the moment, but now
Yep.
looking back, like you said, it was one of the best decisions somebody could have made for you in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you talked about the fear, how scary it was making
Yeah.
these decisions and how sometimes what we think we want for ourselves in our lives changes
Hmm.
over time and
Yep.
evolves. Your
Yep.
voice evolved, right?
Yep.
your path evolved. And I think that's important for people to see, because I think that's another scary thing, whether
Oh
you're
yeah.
an entrepreneur and corporate. And I love that you did both. So this is a great
Yes. Yeah.
conversation, because
Yep.
many entrepreneurs can feel like, because you hear other entrepreneurs saying,
Mm-hmm.
this many businesses fail.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stick it out and keep it
Mm-hmm.
going. But honestly, not everybody's an entrepreneur, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
There's nothing
Yes.
wrong about it.
Yep.
It's what's right for you may not be right for someone else. And
Correct.
sometimes I feel like we need to give permission to ourselves to be like, I hear you, and it's not lighting me up anymore. This
Correct.
isn't like, I tried it. It was good in
Correct.
the moment. And now I get to go back to what really feels right in
Yep.
my soul. Right. So
Yep. Yep.
can we talk into, let's start, because like I said, there's so much right there.
Yeah.
Can we talk into the fear you felt,
Mm-hmm.
and the things
Yeah.
that you did? Like you mentioned your mindset and the growth that you had, that you
Yeah.
got to really, dive into that, and get comfortable with that yourself. And what were the things
Mm-hmm.
that you did to move through the fear of both situations,
Yeah.
when you lost the job, and then when
Mm-hmm.
you decided to make that decision from entrepreneurship back into the corporate space?
Yeah. You know, what's really crazy is like I look back on it now and I call it fear. At the time, it didn't feel fearful. It just kind of felt like, all right, here we go. Like, here's a new thing, here's an unexpected thing. Um, and then living through that, it kind of that's when like the anxiousness and the fear came in. But like I didn't ever when, for example, the day that I was let go from my job, it felt like relief. It actually
Mm.
felt like relief and like, oh, thank God I didn't have to make that decision for myself. Like another thing that as women, I feel like we get so used to being the person that makes the decision, right? And so that was the first time that I felt like, oh my God, for once I had this really big life thing that happened and I didn't have to do it. So that exact example, I felt more excitement than anything because I really knew in my heart of hearts that this wasn't right for me and that it was dragging me down. Now, over the weeks that followed that, sure, the fear came in immediately. I was living in one of the most expensive cities in the world, making no money. Now, mind you, I had picked up fitness literally like right after I was let go from that job. So like that was helpful. But what I honestly, what it looked like was me like just kind of sitting in it. Like I gave myself, I want to say I gave myself about 2 weeks because I had, 2 weeks of severance. And so I gave myself, and again, I was working as a fitness instructor at the same time. So I didn't have absolutely zero.
Mm.
But so I gave myself 2 weeks, and I remember a friend actually gave me this advice of like, don't do anything today. Just
Yeah.
let it be. Like, don't always feel like you have to rebound or go on the like solving, the solve tour, right? Just like let yourself. I had spent basically the 3 months prior to that, like just beating myself down, hence why I even got to the point of being fired. That it's like I needed to give myself like some space to just like breathe. I think that's why people need to be taking vacation between like one job and another. Like we do so much like back to back to back as opposed to just like giving ourselves some space. So what that looked like, it is, it was sitting in it. It was allowing myself to be like, okay, I don't necessarily know what's coming next. And being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I will say that's always been a trait of mine.
Mm.
So like obviously if you're someone who naturally doesn't like being uncomfortable, that's going to look a little bit different for you. But like for me, I've always really enjoyed being uncomfortable. To me, that just means I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm, creating almost a different channel in my mind. So that example was definitely a unique one. And then I'd say like any other time in my life that fear has become a thing, especially now, kind of we'll call it sub or post 27. I've leaned a lot on like just like my mental health like practices. I seek out therapy. I actually am a firm believer in that like your friends and your family should not be giving you advice on kind of life changes all the time. Obviously, yes, they're there for that support, but sometimes you need that like third party, that person that doesn't know you, doesn't know like your prior quote unquote mistakes or changes or traumas that you've gone through to help you think clearly or make decisions clearly.
Mhm.
So I definitely leaned a lot on going to therapy and like throwing things at my therapist at the time and saying like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And she said, all right, let's, talk about that more. Let's like understand, are you running or are you like truly wanting this thing that you're going after? And that was humbling. Like therapy is extremely humbling. I feel like if you don't, hopefully this, in this day and age, yeah, most people who are listening in, you feel comfortable putting yourself in that position. But for me, it was a humbling journey. And
Mhm.
that changed the way I feel like I approach things now. And now I less approach them from a place of, I'm going to do it. And then I feel fearful. Fearful. And more so when I feel this anxiousness coming up, it's like, let's diagnose where that's coming from and why, as opposed to
Mhm.
just like kind of allowing it to just be masked as fear and letting that control you. So, yeah.
So good. Yes, sometimes our family is not the best people to give us advice,
Yeah.
especially when we're moving through a transition and we're already emotional.
Yeah.
They can be triggering,
They
unfortunately,
can
many
be.
times. They can be
I
triggering
can't,
because, yeah,
yes. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with my mom. I'm like, I love my mom is my mom. I love her to death, but like we'll get into like little, fights because I'm trying to make like life decisions and she's coming at me with like from a parental, like, I just want you to be okay. And I'm like,
yes,
sometimes that like level of support isn't good for change. It
yeah.
holds you back in a way. Again, unintentionally, she wants the best, but it makes it hard to sometimes move freely. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think too, they do it out of fear, and
Yeah.
they do it out of love. So there's
Absolutely.
two
Yep.
reasons. They're fearful for us. They don't want to see us
Yep.
fail. They don't want to see
Yep.
us hurting.
Yep.
Like I have two children. As soon as they're hurting, how can I fix it? And
Right. Exactly.
that's not where we need to be coming from.
Yep.
They
Yep.
need to navigate it and learn how to navigate it themselves. We want to
Hmm.
fix it. So that's how our parents are. And so I hear you on that. And also they don't always understand, especially
Oh
entrepreneurial
my
space.
gosh.
I'm
Correct. Yep.
52. So
Yeah.
my parents, like my dad was always an entrepreneur, but my mom
Hmm.
wasn't. She worked hard. She's
Yeah.
has created a really awesome life for herself.
Yeah.
But when I wanted to go into this, well, why don't you just go back to college and get your degree and
Right.
become a therapist,
Right.
right?
Right.
Why are you coaching? That doesn't make, she didn't understand it. So,
Yep.
and then I was triggered because I'm thinking, well, you don't believe in me.
You
And
don't
it's
believe
not,
in me.
right?
Yep.
But it's
Yep.
not
Yeah.
that. It's just that they worry. They want to
Hmm.
make sure that we're okay. So
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because I know that other people are listening and that you gave a solution, like finding a third party, finding someone
Hmm.
else. So like,
Hmm.
and then if you don't, if you don't have the means to have a therapist or it's not covered, whatever that looks like for you, there
Yeah.
are other avenues for you to reach
Hmm.
out to
Absolutely.
get the support. Like there's groups on social media that you can join
Absolutely.
of
Yep.
people who have similar interests and have similar
Hmm.
goals and talk with them because they
Yes,
understand where
exactly.
you're coming
Surround
from.
yourself with with people who I think it's equally as important to surround yourself with people that think like you and don't think like you, but like at least it's in support of like the goal that you're after.
Right.
So I 100% agree. I think like leaning on groups and things like that, I do that so much and it's very helpful because at least you are entering in kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's
Hmm.
huge. And I talk about that all the time.
Yeah,
If you're comfortable, that means to me, you're stuck. You're not really
correct.
growing. And it
Yeah.
really depends on what your goals are. If you're like, if
Yep.
you're at a certain stage in your life and this is comfortable and this is what you've worked for, then awesome.
Yep.
But if you're still not where your vision is and you want to go, you have
Hmm.
to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable
Yes.
because
Yes.
that means you're staying within your little comfort zone.
Yep.
You're not uncomfortable. So it's
Yep.
just doing one little thing every day that's a little uncomfortable is going to get you to
Hmm.
your goals faster. So I
Yep.
love that. I love that
Absolutely.
you brought that up and you learned that really early on. It sounds,
Yeah. I was
yeah,
very fortunate in that sense. Yes.
yeah. Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of
Yeah.
that and how it's in that practicing the pause is what I took from
Hmm.
what you shared about,
Hmm.
you had 2 weeks, your friend
Yep.
gave you great advice because many
Yep.
times no matter action brings clarity. I always say
Yep.
that action
Yep.
brings clarity. That being said, it's really important also to sometimes take the pause in
Hmm.
order to take action
Hmm.
versus just reacting. Reacting
Yep.
action isn't the best. It's
Correct.
intentional action, which is going to get you to where you are. So and
Correct.
you
Yep.
gave yourself this space, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful share and message
Yeah.
for, those who are listening. So if you're looking
Yeah.
to pivot or you're in the landscape of the world right now for many people is
Hmm.
very scary.
It's very
So
scary.
many
Yeah.
people are in reactionary action.
Yep. Yep.
So I think that your message of like, you took the pause, you took the time to really sit in
Hmm.
it and go, okay, what are my next steps? What are my
Correct.
options? And really
Hmm.
weighing out all the options. And you decided, I'm going to do something that lights me up.
Correct.
You
Yep.
know, it may
Yep.
not be my
Exactly.
end all be all, but
Yep.
it's going to what lights me up. And I need that right now in my life because
Yeah.
you just went through months of like not so good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Could not have said it better.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we talked about the fear. We
Yeah.
talked about the getting comfortable with getting uncomfortable. Can you share with us, can we talk about the pivoting?
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
somebody, what advice would you give? Because you've done it, you've done both, you've been on both
Hmm.
sides of the coin. What
Yeah.
advice would you tell someone who is thinking about pivoting, whether they're
Yeah.
looking to come from corporate into entrepreneurship, or those people that are ready? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs now that are going back to
Hmm.
corporate. So
Hmm.
what would you
Hmm.
say to somebody? What advice can you give if they're feeling the fear, they don't know what they should do, but they feel
Yeah.
like, you know what, they it's time for a change?
Here's the thing that I think that we have to like uncondition or decondition, whatever term I should be using, but we have to remind ourselves. And I think this is what like traditional kind of like education and workforce and things like that have done to us as a ever evolving society is it's made it seem as though like when you make a decision, that is the final decision. You cannot change your mind. I
Mm.
mean, you were kind of alluding to this a little bit earlier. I think give first and foremost, like give yourself permission to like learn from this next thing. Like if you see switching to entrepreneurship or switching to corporate as the final end all be all, it's going to number one, that's the first way to make it feel scary, right? Because you think you're in your mind, you're like, wow, this is a decision that's going to change my life forever. That's going to be my life forever. And that's just not the case. Until the day you are no longer on this planet, like you always have permission to change your mind to, or and not even change your mind, but just to change what you want to do. So I think number one, like give yourself a little bit of grace to say, like, you know what? I'm making this decision because right now it makes sense for me and I'm excited to learn along the way. But always know that like there are 20 other options out there if you get into it and you realize, that's not for me. And that's fine. It's not a failure. I think we have to stop thinking about changing our mind as failure because that is the biggest way to like let ourselves down. Like failure to who? Like against
Exactly.
whose standards? Because yours is the only one that matters, right? So if you're the goal in life is to always be learning and growing. Like I feel like you're doing exactly that by just trying something new. Um, and then I would say like after you've, allowed yourself the permission to make that pivot is like make sure that you're being really like you're not setting yourself up for well, we won't call it failure, but like lack of success. And what I mean by that, like if you were going to commit to being an entrepreneur, if you're going to commit to going back to into the corporate space, do it 100%,
Mm.
right? Like make sure, and I don't, and what I mean by that is you can be somebody who's in corporate and an entrepreneur at the same time. What I don't mean like don't split your time, but just make sure that like you're being really intentional about what you are doing.
Mm.
Don't slack off. Don't kind of like do it, halfway. Make sure that you're just being really intentional about like how you're, pouring into it. I think a lot of times, like even the times at times, excuse me, I can't speak right now. Even when I've done, like, for example, I've tried entrepreneurship, I didn't really do it all the way. When I
Mm.
did it all the way, I was successful. When I did it halfway, I wasn't because like people can sense that people they can I don't think we realize that. So I think for me that's really been one of my biggest learnings is like even when I go back to my job in New York, the one that I was let go from, like I wasn't giving them like my best self, you know
Mm.
what I mean? And that is why I ended up in the position that I was in. So when you make these pivots, when you make these changes, like give them your best self, give it like the best that you have.
Mm.
Otherwise, I do feel like that actually ends up how like you mentally say, like, oh shoot, I failed because you know deep down that you didn't give it your all. No one feels like they failed if they've given it their all.
True. True.
Yeah.
And I love how you said, like, if this is constant, this is just growing,
Hmm.
and see it as a growing moment and not a failure. It's actually a success. If
Yeah.
that's your mission to consistently grow and evolve,
Yeah.
and I mean, we get one go round on this planet.
Yeah.
So during this time, we should hopefully we're growing and evolving to do our best to reach our best self, right?
Yeah.
While we're here,
Absolutely.
it's actually a success when you make a pivot versus a failure. Failure would
Absolutely.
be like banging your head against the wall, saying, "I'm going to
Correct.
continue this because I committed to it." But if it's not lighting you up, then it's not your
Then
purpose,
it's not
right?
exactly like I'm like the last thing I know in my heart that like when I get to like my last day on earth, like I never want to feel like, dang it, I didn't try all of these things. That to me will feel like I let myself down.
Yeah.
And so that could look like, again, trying out entrepreneurship, going back to the corporate space. That could also look like moving across the country, like, anything. This is like any note for anything you do in life. So yeah.
Yeah, that I love everything that you shared. And like you said at the end of life, like when you said failure to who?
Yeah.
Who are you worried about? And I know for me, when I started my business, I had a huge fear of being seen. And I was worried
Hmm.
about judgment. I was a stay-at-home
Hmm.
mom starting a business, and they're like, you
Hmm.
got to go live and share your story. And I am just came out of a divorce. And I'm like,
Hmm.
what are these moms that I went to
Gonna
these
think about
school with
me.
going to
Yeah.
think about me? Who is she coming online now all of a sudden out of the blue,
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it held me back. And I really didn't go live on my Facebook profile for years.
Yeah.
I did it in my groups, I did it everywhere else, but I didn't do it there for the fear of judgment. And I'm like,
Hmm.
whose judgment am I worried
Who's
about?
judging me?
And
Yeah.
honestly, nobody's thinking about me as much as
Right.
I think they're thinking about me,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're actually judging yourself by thinking they're judging you. It's like, and if they are, first of all, they'll never say it to your face. Let's be real.
Right.
So does it really matter?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I was actually surprised how many people came out and said,
In support.
you're in support and you're such an inspiration. And thank you for,
Hmm.
wow, I never knew you were doing this, because I didn't
Yep.
tell them.
Yep. And it gives, I
So,
mean, the amount of times that I've had people reach out to me during big moments in my life where I've been vocal about something that has been uncomfortable. Literally every single time I've done it, I get a slew of people, and I don't even mean that in a like pat myself on the back because they've been very hard things for me to share.
yeah.
But the amount of people that I've had come to me and say like, "Thank you so much," because that gave me the strength to do this, that, or whatever myself.
Mhm.
You know what I don't hear from the people who are judging me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm like, to me, it's like, you going out on the limb and you doing kind of things that make you uncomfortable. It actually gives permission to other people who are watching you. It gives them the permission to also be uncomfortable with their life choices. And I mean that in the biggest compliment, like be uncomfortable with your decisions.
Yes, absolutely. Because most people, when they're in it, when we're feeling stuck or we're going through a hard time,
Hmm.
we really truly believe we're the only ones going through it.
Oh,
Nobody's going to
oh,
understand. We
always.
feel alone. So by you sharing and being vulnerable and in walking through the hard and sharing the hard, other people are like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. It's so nice to
Yeah,
feel that I'm not alone. Not that we want to be everybody miserable, but we also it's
absolutely.
important that we know that other people are going through it too. We're
Are
not
going through
alone on an
something.
island.
Yeah,
Yeah, everybody's going
absolutely.
through something.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your podcast. What was the inspiration
Yeah.
behind it? How did you get started? And tell us all the juicy details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been wanting to start a podcast for a while, and I even like had tried a podcast like during COVID when I think feel like we were all just kind of like I need to talk to somebody. So but this, when I created my podcast, I created it earlier this year. It's called The Good Guide, and my last name is Good, so I feel like anything I ever do, I always try to put my name in it because it's just so good not to. Um, but I really how it came to be was I know that I've made a lot of career decisions and pivots and changes and all of the things. And I would love to say that when I was making them, I knew the impact they would have. Did I know I wanted to make the changes? Yes. Did I understand what the repercussions and the impact would be of them? No. Did I always have people to help me almost like throw ideas at a board and help me figure it out. No. Sure, I
Mhm.
had mentors, I had people that were in my corner, but like did and I still felt, to your point, like I was going through it alone. I'd never seen, when I first left my well-paying corporate job and I went to fitness, I'd never seen anybody do that. When I left, when I left Minneapolis to go to New York, I didn't see anyone do that. When I graduated from college and went, and I could have easily gone to New York City, I went to small town Minneapolis. Like I'd no see nobody do that. So for me, it was like I really wanted to be the person who done the things to someone listening. Because to your point of like it feels like you make decisions alone sometimes, and it's very, very scary. And especially in the corporate space, I think like what I love so much is that we do really rally behind and applaud individuals who want to be entrepreneurs. 100% they should be, because it's a very hard thing to be an entrepreneur. Like there's a lot of risk there. But I think it's also, especially as a woman, what I don't see a lot of is like kudos and clapping for like wanting to stay in the corporate space.
Mhm.
Um, and not that it doesn't exist, but I don't see it kind of like outwardly discussed of like, hey, if you want to continue to climb the corporate ladder, that's okay. That's not selling your soul. You know what I mean? There are a large population that go after corporate careers and do so successfully. And so I just really wanted to bring awareness and like share space with women who have made the active decision to stay in corporate. Now, on my podcast, I also talk to entrepreneurs. I also talk to, just honestly anybody. But it's really just to kind of share the perspective of how someone in the corporate space approaches things like leadership, things like
Mhm.
changing careers, things like having to, negotiate salary, like these really uncomfortable conversations that like no one really has out loud. So that's why I created the podcast. I really did feel like I wanted to kind of reach down and help anyone who, whether you're early in your career, and therefore I'm kind of acting as mentor, or whether I'm learning from someone who I'm talking to. There's just so much to be learned and shared, and so that's why I created the podcast, and it's just been so much fun, especially as I've recently started a new job. I was recently promoted, and even on one of my last recordings, I felt like I was actually seeking counsel because I was going through imposter syndrome and just feeling like, wait, why did I get this promotion? Like, am I actually ready? And so it's even moments like that where I try to be super real about like what I'm facing in my career, and again, hoping that that resonates with my listeners. So yeah.
Oh, I think it's incredible. And I like that you're shining the light on the corporate space going, it's great if you want to be in corporate, right?
Yeah.
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 Like go climb the
And
corporate ladder if that's what you want to do. And, do
exactly.
what lights you up. I think that's one of the
Exactly.
messages here. It's regardless of what
Yeah.
side of the coin you're on, just do what lights you up. And if you're not
Hmm.
happy in that space, then find what lights you up. Like you get
Hmm.
one go around, and it looks like you've navigated that along your journey. And now you're a great example, and you're out there sharing it with the world, which I think is spectacular. So make
Thank
sure you
you.
go check out the Good Guide, and that's
Yeah.
Goode, good with an
Yes.
E on the end, Good Guide. And go
Thank you.
go check Shanarra out over there and her guests. And where can we find you also, Shanarra?
Yeah, I do a lot of my sharing, just especially because it's in the professional space, but I do a lot of my sharing on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, it's just my first and last name, so Shanarra Good. And then I do also share my episodes and clips like that on Instagram, which is just the Good Guide Podcast. Right now, I'm in my summer hiatus, and so I'm starting to or not re-record, but I'm starting to record again for my second season. So I finished my first season towards the beginning of the summer, and then I'll be starting season two in just a couple of weeks.
Oh, well, congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your promotion. How exciting.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much. It's been a wild couple of months, I'll tell you that.
Ah, well, I'm sure you're perfect for the position. So
Thank
congratulations on
you.
it. Wishing you all the best
Thank you so
in that
much.
position. So I
Thank
have a
you.
question for you. If
Yeah.
based on everything you've gone through, if you knew then what you know now,
Yeah.
what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this question. I ask this question often. I think about it also literally every day. Um, I would I I would tell myself that like you don't have to live life so quickly, if that makes sense.
Mm,
There's no such thing as a timetable when it comes to decisions or the way that you live your life. Again, I approach a lot, especially, I just turned 33 not too long ago, and I approach a lot from like a lens of like there's so much pressure on women today. There always has been, but especially now. And I feel like I've always been like, okay, well, I've got to graduate college. I've got to get a good job. I've got to, I was on this timetable that really was like, whose timetable was it? Like, who set this timetable for me? When
mm,
I finally gave myself permission to just kind of like live life as it comes and make decisions based off of what I wanted in the moment, I've just felt so much more free. And I also know that if I would have made certain decisions earlier on in my life, that I wouldn't be the fulfilled, the happy, the, successful person that I am now. So
mm,
I would just tell myself that like you are going to live life, you are going to hit milestones that are right for you.
mm,
And what do they say? Like comparison is the biggest thief of joy. Like don't compare yourself to anyone outside of like what you want, who you are, like what you want to achieve in life. And you would save yourself a lot of just kind of like heartache and sadness. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
That's great advice. It's not something I've ever heard, like really, like, don't rush it. Don't try.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time. And it reminds me of, I heard Gary Vee giving advice to a young
Mm,
person, probably
yeah.
someone, I think he was still in college. So he's in his early
Yeah.
20s. And he
Yeah.
asked him, what should I do? And he's like, do whatever you want until
Yeah.
about 35. He's like, do
Yeah.
what you want to do, what lights you up, and make it happen.
Hmm.
You've got plenty of time. He's like, don't
So
rush
much
it.
time.
Don't
So
feel,
much
yeah,
time.
don't rush it. So that resonate, that reminded me of him saying that, because I thought that was such great advice for
Yeah.
Gary Vee to say, because he's so super successful, and he
Yeah.
advocates
Absolutely.
strongly for the young people. That he's like, there's
Yeah.
so much opportunity for you right now in the world.
Hmm.
Don't rush it. Like, you don't
Hmm.
feel like you've got to make it all happen right now. And then I
Yeah.
heard an interview by Jimmy Johnson, the head coach of the
Oh,
Dallas
nice.
Cowboys, from you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he shared so much, and I was blown away. He made decisions based on the next day. He didn't make decisions based on 20
Mm.
years from now. Like,
Yep.
so many of us are taught, like, what's your vision, your long-term vision? He goes, I don't know how I became successful.
I'm not
He's
gonna
like, I
make
just
one.
made my
Yeah.
decisions based on what made me happy in the moment. And I stopped
Yes.
coaching when it no longer made me happy. He goes, and
Yeah.
they're like, what are you doing tomorrow? He's like, I'll probably be going fishing because that's what makes me happy right
I
now.
love
And I
that.
was like, wow, what a powerful message. Like,
I
do
actually,
what lights you
that's,
up.
yes, I absolutely love that because I used to be, and in certain elements, yes, but I used to be like so futuristic.
Mm.
Again, rushing through life, rushing to that next thing. I used to always be thinking, okay, well, I got to make this decision because, in 5 years from now, that's going to give me this. And it's so stressful. It is
Yes.
so stressful to be like constantly on a timeline. Like now I give myself loose kind of like goals or like, oh, okay, it'd be good to like think about wanting to do, but it's not like hard and fast. This has to happen or I'm gonna feel like this. Like that is so stressful to like live life. That's why I love that idea. And honestly, I could still probably even be less. And I love that, like, just
Yeah.
thought process of, yeah, live for tomorrow. Like, think about tomorrow. And because you're not even promised that.
You're not
So,
guaranteed
yeah,
anything. So do what's making you happy now. Because if we're like, well, I'll
yeah.
be happy when I'm 65 and retired, we may not even make it. Right.
Right.
So
Exactly. And I've set
if you're
myself up
always
for that. And
striving, right, then you're never
yeah,
happy. And what was this go round about? So,
yeah.
Shanarra, I want to say thank you. I have one more question. I'm
Thank
going to let you
you.
go,
Yeah.
to respect your time. So what's a fun fact that you could share about Shanarra that we wouldn't know from your podcast, and we wouldn't know about you just seeing you on social? Like, what's a little behind the scenes,
Yeah,
Shanarra?
let's see. Okay, so I would say fun fact now, like if you would have asked me a couple of years ago, it'd probably be something different. But now it's actually, I think it surprises a lot of people how much I just enjoy my like alone time. I'm very much an extroverted introvert. I don't think I've always been that way, but I've definitely morphed into that over the years. Like I recharge, I've read over 100 books so far this year. Like I just like
Wow.
really enjoy my downtime. Like I'm a homebody.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people think that just because I do a lot of things that are very like out and loud and proud and just kind of like vocal, but like no. If you meet me, if I'm like out with friends, I'm actually like more of the reserved one. So probably I think that would probably surprise people, or I don't know if it's necessarily a fun fact, but it's a fact.
I love it. And
So
that's,
yeah.
we touched on that earlier before, because we talked a little bit about that behind the scenes,
Yeah.
extroverted, introvert. And
Yeah.
that's something that I shared with you. People are shocked too about, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not an extrovert. And I'm like, oh no, you put me in a room full of people. I'm in the back waiting, like,
Correct.
again, I'm watching the room,
I'm
navigating the room, and then
very
I'll
strategic.
slide in
Yes.
where I feel like comfortable. That's so I get to get comfortable with getting
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, stepping out of
Yes.
my comfort zone in a big room of people. And then
Yeah.
I meet a few people, and then I get to
Correct.
leave and
And
recharge
then
my energy.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I
Exactly. Yep.
gotta recharge that energy. So thank you so
Couldn't
much
agree
for
more.
sharing that. Because I'm
Thank
sure
you
there's a
so
lot of
much.
introverts that, we've got to be on for our time, but
Yeah.
you're allowed to have that space to go recharge and
Yes,
be the homebody.
exactly.
So I want to
Uh,
say thank you so much, Shanarra, for being me
Thank you,
here
Heidi. This has
today.
been fantastic.
It's been such a pleasure. You are so beautiful, both on the inside and the out. And I'm so
Thank you.
grateful to be connected with you. For you listening, please go check out the Good Guide podcast. Go connect with Shanarra. Everything's about connection and relationships. Know that
Yep.
you are not alone in your journey, whether you're pivoting, whether you're making decisions right now. I know a lot of people are making major decisions in their life
Hmm.
with the way the world is right now. So just want you to know that we're here to support you. If you want to, if you reach out, she's an awesome lady.
Yes. Thank you so much, Heidi. This has
Go check
honestly
out her
been
podcast.
so fun. I really appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. Have an amazing day. For those of you listening, have a wonderful day, Shanarra, and be empowered to be seen and heard. We'll see you on the next episode of the Be She podcast.
No problem.